So good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to be here today. I'm going to move this so I don't keep bumping it. To speak to you about lots of things that are going on at the state and lots of good things that are going on at the state. And I always love the opportunity to share the good news. We know that our districts are all working together along with our department to really focus on what can we do about our dropout rates, because I'm concerned about every child that we lose that doesn't walk across our stage that's college and career ready. You know, we're living in a new era in public education in Mississippi. You know, we have adopted some very strong and rigorous college and career ready standards that are applicable for all of our students. We've aligned our assessments to those standards, and we've got a great accountability system that is focused on growth and achievement. And those three pieces of this are really propelling our work at the department and moving us forward. You know, every time I speak, I go back to what we have been our focus, and our focus is really about our strategic plan. We revised the strategic plan, the board adopted it in December of last year, and it's focused on five clear goals around the students and students' education. You know, we've got to change and are starting to change our conversation about what we can't do because of a lack of resources or some kind of challenges that we may face to what we can do and what we will do, because that's the way that we keep moving forward. So the 5 goals are really based on a very firm belief that all children, regardless of where they live and regardless of their abilities, can achieve things at high levels and be globally competitive. Our 5 goals are very focused. Goal 1 is that all students are proficient and showing growth. Goal 2 is that all students will be graduating from high school, college, and career ready. Goal 3, every child will have access to a highly qualified teacher and a highly successful early childhood program. Goal 4, every school will have effective teachers and leaders. And goal 5, everyone is going to be using data to focus on improving student outcomes. The ultimate goal of all of this is ensuring that our students graduate from high school and are prepared, whether they decide to go on to a 2-year university, a 2-year school, a 4-year university, or even immediately into the world of work or into the military service. But planning for this starts very early. And my emphasis, and I've been talking about it over and over since I've been here, is the focus on early childhood. We have launched our very first publicly funded 4-year-old preschool program with the advent of the Early Learning Collaborative Act. That was passed a couple of years ago, and we started it. This was its first year of implementation, was this year. There's a lot of research out there, there's a preponderance of research out there that talks about the power of early childhood programming and why it's so important to get children in and learning under a high-quality program. Not only does it develop their academic skills and their social skills, but it is critical in a state where the poverty level is as high as ours is to get these little ones in so that we can be giving them a developmentally appropriate program. Mississippi has the highest poverty rate of any state in the nation. But there's other things that research also has followed children from pre-K on, and it will also tell you that these same children will have higher rates of high school graduation, higher test scores, and fewer behavior problems. And so there's a lot of longitudinal studies out there that support this. But one of the things that we had Mississippi State do this year was a research on what does it look like in Mississippi. So we gave them our data for about 12 years worth of data, and it was a very simple study. They took a look at basically what I'm going to call 2 buckets of children, right? Those that had attended a Title I or publicly funded pre-K, and those that had not. And what they found after 12 years of this, those that had attended pre-K were more likely to be successful in the K-12 system than those who had not. Specifically, they found that those who had attended pre-K, either Title I or locally funded, were 1.5 times more likely to be proficient reading in 3rd grade. And if they were proficient readers in 3rd grade, they were 9 times more likely to be proficient readers in 8th grade. And those that were proficient readers in 8th grade were 3.5 times more likely to graduate on time. Now that's powerful. That's strictly not looking at the program itself, but just the fact that they had attended a pre-K class. This study supports what we're doing with our early learning collaboratives. We simply just don't have enough of them. We've been level funded for the past 3 years. We're asking for additional money because when we put the RFPs out there, we had over 35 applications that came back in, but we only had enough money to fund 11. So part of what we did when we had them there was we also said, well, let's see what if we give them an assessment to let us know what would their kindergarten readiness look like. And so at the end of the year, over half of the children that we assessed met or exceeded a kindergarten readiness level. Now that is a very powerful piece of information because we then went on to screen those little ones that were showing up as flagged as needing additional help because we were then able to get services to those children much earlier. And this is absolutely critical. The earlier the intervention, the better. We also started this year implementing the Literacy-Based Promotion Act. You know, this was the first year that children had to pass a third grade summative assessment in order to move on to fourth grade. And when all of this came out in the fall of last year, there were all kinds of dire predictions. I was hearing we're going to fail over 50% of the children that are in kindergarten. There were a lot of people out there putting out this information, and the initial data did not look good. The initial kindergarten readiness data showed us that 2 out of every 3 children that were entering our kindergarten classes were not prepared for school. 66%. And that was alarming. But God love those kindergarten teachers because they doubled down. And by the end of the year, the children that had, sorry, not kindergarten, the first through third grade, I'm back on kindergarten, we had moved that from that low level of performance from kindergarten. Think about the early entrants. Now think about, we'd not really done much other than PD. 92% of our third graders passed the third grade summative. 92%. But the law states that you only had to pass at the lowest achievement level. That's not a high enough bar. We've got to move that bar higher to where we're talking, because I would hear people say, oh, 92% of our third graders are proficient in reading. And I say, no. 92% of our third graders passed the third grade summative, but you did not have to be proficient. You had to score at the lowest level. So we're going to be working with our legislators this year to raise that bar. We have been implementing college and career ready standards since 2010, and my hat is off to every teacher in this state because the proof is now that it is working. We just recently released our national assessment, our 2015 National Assessment of Education Progress, or NAEP scores. That's the nation's report card. And we, in Mississippi, are to be commended. Our teachers, our principals, and our superintendents are to be commended. Mississippi is the only state in the nation, let me repeat that, the only state in the nation that showed significant growth in fourth grade reading and fourth grade math. So that lets us know what we are doing in our classrooms is working, but it's going to take some time. Fourth grade reading increased from 21 to 26%. Fourth grade math increased from 26 to 30%. In reading, every single subgroup improved. That means African Americans, Hispanics, students with disabilities, economically disadvantaged children. All subgroups showed improvement. In Mississippi is actually the #1 state in the nation for the average scale score for fourth grade math. We are making significant growth. We are not where we need to be. No one is saying that, but we are moving in the right direction. And even in eighth grade NAEP, when all other states went down, we either stayed steady or increased slightly in eighth grade. But this intense focus on literacy is paying off. The hard work of our teachers is paying off. We've got local school boards, we've got our state school board, we've got our legislative partners who are all determined to continue working to improve education in this state. It takes all of us to make this happen. This is not something that any one person or any one group of people could possibly do. PARCC results came out. You know, last year we administered the PARCC for the first and only time that we're going to be administering it, but we administered it for the first time last spring. That was the first time that these children had taken an assessment that was aligned to our rigorous standards, and our children did well. We are getting ready to release our 3rd through 8th grade scores on Thursday at our state board meeting, but we've already released our Algebra 1 and English 2 scores. 49% of the students in this state scored at the top 2 performance levels on the Park Assessment in English 2. 49%. That is significant because this test was far more rigorous than the one that they'd ever taken before. And 27% of our children scored at the top 2 levels on algebra. Algebra was an issue nationwide. And that we know that that is an issue, and I'm going to speak to that in just one second. But here's a little embedded piece inside that algebra. We had 2,500 middle school students that took that Algebra 1 test. Their pass rate, 70.9% at the top 2 levels on algebra. That's huge. So think about that group as it moves through high school. Hats off to those teachers and counselors for identifying those students for this type of rigorous class. You know, we have been raising the level of rigor year after year. And I really want to say our teachers have been faithful to these standards. They have not backed off. They are as committed, if not more committed, than any other group of teachers I've ever seen to ensure that our children are going to achieve at high levels. We believe in our children. Holding them to high standards is the only way we're going to make this happen. You know, I've told the story before. Both of my girls played D1 travel ball and soccer. And we traveled all over, basically, from Niagara Falls to Miami and to Kentucky and back again in tournaments. And I've said it again and again. Every time my girls played a team that was worse than their team, they played down to that level. And every time my girls played a team that was really better than their team, they played up to that level. So there's nothing wrong with setting high standards and making children reach to that, because that is something that I think is critical. I want you to think about Kentucky for a second. I looked at Kentucky a lot. Kentucky has been a partner with us for a long time. But I looked, they were one of the early adopters, as were we, of those college and career ready standards. They have more than doubled their college and career readiness percentages in 5 years. When Kentucky first started out, they had 32% of their children who were stated as being college and career ready. Right now, Kentucky has 62% of their children graduating college and career ready. But they stuck to it. Their graduation rate has also increased. Kentucky beat the national average of 81% in 12 and 13 with an average of 86% of a graduation rate. And their graduation rate in 13-14 went up to 87.4%. But they worked together as a state board, as a State Department, and with all of the LEAs and the legislature working together, pushing Kentucky forward in terms of education. Even our ACT score, our average ACT score, is the highest it's been in 20 years at 19. It too is edging up. We're asking districts to really take a close look on how they're programming for children. Are you enrolling children in the core courses that they need? That's all children. And we've had conversations again and again about setting expectations. Children can do and achieve what you tell them that they can do and achieve, and what you support them in doing just that work. So our ACT results, we are concerned about. You know, if you look at both public and private, you've got 11% of our children who are graduating being deemed college and career ready in all 4 areas. But if you look at just our 11th graders from last year, just that bit alone, only 9% of those children were scoring college and career ready in all 4 subject areas. The nation's average is 28%. So you can see we've got a ways to go, but we're using that data. We're using the data from ACT to say what is happening from 11th grade back to pre-K, and what do we need to change and do differently so that our outcomes will be different once they reach that year. We need to set these children up for success. There's a real disparity around the state, too, about the access to advanced classes, and that's a concern of mine. It has been since I arrived here. We've got high schools that aren't offering not even one AP class. Now, I know and you know, we've got children all over this state that if they had access to AP classes, could take AP classes and do well. Mississippi ranks last in the nation for the percent of children taking AP exams, with only 15% of our kids taking just one AP exam. The national average is 36%. So to me, if you build it, they will come. If you provide that access, children can step forward and do well. Even the research is telling us, even taking an AP class, even if they don't pass the exam, puts them in a better position to succeed in college than if they had never had access to any advanced classes. So we're working on that. We've got a person, that Wendy Clemens, she's on it. We've got an AP initiative, and I said, we need to make this happen, because I am a firm believer that we've got children across the state that need to have access and that can do well. We opened our first early college high school. We modeled it after North Carolina. It's the Golden Triangle Early College High School. It opened in August with 62 students, and I was there the day that they opened. And it was exciting to see these little ones who are bright children. They're not the kids that you typically think of. They're kids that just couldn't find their way, if you will, in the traditional high school and needed some other kind of structure in order to be successful. So that's the first one we opened. It's a partnership with 5 of our districts, Mississippi State and East Mississippi Community College. And these kids were so excited. I've already received two letters from these little ones. I told them to write me and let me know how it was going, and they took me up on it. And they are absolutely loving it. These children will graduate from Golden Triangle Early College High School with a diploma and an AA degree. Think about that. Walking the stage with 2 years of college already behind them. It is designed to help these children succeed. 48% of those little ones that are in those seats right now are first-generation from college-going families. 69% come from homes whose annual household income is less than $39,000 a year. Now, this is an opportunity that these children will have in order to be successful, and we've already got other districts saying, how can I get on board? We've already got other districts reaching out to us saying, how can we get included in that? How can we set up an early college high school in our district? We're going to be opening up a lot of new pathways. We formed a career and technical education task force. We invited our businesses in and said, what do you need from us in order to be able to supply you with the kind of employees that you need? And we're already looking at how do we expand that and how do we expand that around the state. We're opening up different options for children. You know, no longer is the end-of-course assessment a requirement, passing the end-of-course assessment, a requirement for graduation. Yes, it must be taken, but then we can use that score in combination with other scores to open up an additional option for children. Starting next year, those same courses are going to count for 25% of a student's grade. So it's got to mean something, and we need to hold children accountable for learning, and so we're going to build that into their final grade. You know, and I know we have the ACT as an option. Those that score 17 or higher, earning a C or higher, you know, credit-bearing dual enrollment courses, et cetera, et cetera. We are opening those avenues up across our state. My concern, and I've already talked to the legislature about this, is that the same courses cost differently depending on where you live. So I've got children that may only have to pay $50 for a course, and I've got children that have got to pay the full ride. Now, in a state that has as much poverty as it does, imagine the child that wants to take that class, but mom and dad simply cannot afford it. That's an equity issue. So we need to make this affordable. And we just came from a conference in Austin. Ohio, this blew me away. I had to repeat it twice to myself. Ohio allows children as early as 7th grade, there's 2 parts to this, to earn Carnegie-bearing units, to take dual enrollment classes. You know what the cap is? You can't take more by the time you graduate from high school than 120 credit hours. Let me repeat that. You can't take more than 120 credit hours. Now, you know and I know that's pretty much a 4-year degree. Think about that. Think about the ability of children to not have anything impeding their progress. They could take it as early as 7th grade. So it's possible. States are doing it. And that's one of the beauties of working collaboratively with these folks, because we can think, then how do we bring it back to Mississippi and make it happen for the children here? You know, types of diplomas, we're looking at that right now. I would love to see it very simply be in 2 buckets: a standard diploma or endorsements of distinction, STEM, technology, whatever the endorsements are, and then an endorsement for those kids who are, obviously the certificate is not enough, but we need to figure out a way for our little ones who are that 1% of our special ed to give them something that's going to be meaningful for them in life as well. But this mod diploma, we're now hearing it's not being accepted by our colleges and universities. It is not being accepted by any of the military, and it is not being accepted by employers. So imagine graduating with a mod diploma and it being totally useless. So we're looking at that as well. You know, I think this is an exciting time for us because I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities opening up for our children. And to me, that is the gift of this job. The gift of this job is working with the talented people that I'm working with at the department, the incredible people that I'm working with in the LEAs, with the superintendents and the principals and the teachers, and saying, there are no limits to what we can do for the children of the state. There simply aren't. We're only limited by our imagination about what we can do and what we can create for all children, regardless of zip code, regardless of skin color, and regardless of where they reside. So I have no doubt that the people in this state and the people in this room are as passionate about this work as I am. I love this work. This is what drives me every single day. This is what I'm committed to. This is what you're committed to. You're committed to making outcomes better for children each and every year. So I want to thank you for the time that you're here. You didn't have to be here, and I appreciate you being here, trying to figure out just that one other thing that we could be doing to help children stay in school and be successful. But I know we are going to move this state forward. There is no doubt in my mind. And together, let me repeat that, together, we are going to get this done. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for having me today.